I need to tell you about my screwed-up family. I have parents and an older sister named Celine. From the moment I could understand words, I knew I wasn't the favorite kid. My parents never tried to hide it. They'd literally say stuff like, "Celine is our special girl," right in front of me. Celine got everything first. Everything better, everything new. When the latest iPhone came out, guess who got it? Celine. When designer jeans were trending, Celine had 3 pairs while I wore her old ones that were already stretched out and faded. "We already spent our clothing budget on your sister," Mom would say when I'd ask for new clothes. "Besides, these clothes are perfectly fine." Perfectly fine. That became the motto of my childhood. Everything I got was perfectly fine, while Celine got the best we could afford. The worst part was Christmas and birthdays. Celine would get piles of expensive gifts while I'd get maybe 2 or 3 small things from the clearance section. When I complained, Mom would say, "We want you to learn the value of money. Celine needs these things for her advanced classes." By the time I was 15, I'd given up asking for things. What was the point? I got a job at a grocery store, lying about my age because I was desperate to have my own money. But even then, my parents would take my paychecks whenever Celine needed something. "Celine needs this more than you," Mom would always say. "We're teaching you about family loyalty." But I never saw Celine sacrificing anything for the family. It was always me giving up something so she could have more. When Celine graduated high school, my parents paid for her entire education at some fancy private college. We're talking full tuition, room and board, spending money, everything. Must have cost them over $130,000. But they never complained about the expense. Celine got her degree in marketing or something like that. But you know what she did after graduation? Got married immediately and never worked a single day in her field. Not one day. All that expensive education, and she became a stay-at-home wife right away. Meanwhile, I had to figure out college on my own. I applied for every scholarship I could find and busted my ass to get good grades. When I got accepted to Ridgewell State College with a full academic scholarship, my parents acted like it was no big deal. I moved into the dorms immediately. I couldn't get out of that house fast enough. Finally, I could breathe without feeling like I was taking up space that belonged to Celine. College was tough. I studied full-time and worked part-time at a campus bookstore to pay for food, books, and everything else. While Celine was living it up as a newlywed with 0 responsibilities, I was pulling all-nighters and counting every dollar. After graduation, I landed a really good job at a marketing firm. That's where I met Eli, my future husband. We started dating, and for the first time I felt like someone actually saw me as a person worth paying attention to. Eli and I had been together for 3 years, and during that time Celine had already popped out 2 kids. She was living the suburban housewife dream while I was building my career and my relationship. But Celine couldn't just let me be happy. Whenever I'd mention Eli, she'd make these snide comments. "You're so lucky you managed to snag such a rich guy," she'd say with this fake sweet voice. "I mean, you really hit the jackpot there." "I didn't hunt for rich guys, Celine," I'd always reply. "It just happened naturally." "Sure it did," she'd smirk. "Just happened to find the one guy whose family has money. What a coincidence." It pissed me off because that's not how it happened at all. I fell for Eli because he was kind and funny and treated me like I mattered. I didn't even know about his family's money until we'd been dating for months. But Celine made it sound like I was some gold digger who planned the whole thing. "You always were the smart one," she'd say. "Figured out how to marry up while the rest of us have to work for everything." This was rich coming from someone who'd never worked a day in her life and whose parents paid for her entire college education. But Celine had this way of twisting everything to make herself the victim and me the villain. Eli noticed how Celine treated me during family gatherings. He'd see her making these comments and the way my parents would just laugh along with her. After one particularly bad dinner where Celine spent the whole time making jokes about my lucky catch, Eli pulled me aside. "Your sister is jealous of you," he said. "She's been handed everything her whole life, and now she sees you actually earning something good, and she can't stand it." I'd never thought about it that way, but Eli was right. Celine was jealous. For the first time in our lives, I had something she didn't. Something she couldn't just take from me or convince our parents to give her instead. Things got really weird when my parents found out about Eli's family money. I casually mentioned that his mom owned a few companies and did some investing. I didn't think it was a big deal. Eli never acted like he was rich or anything. But my parents, holy, they completely changed their tune about me overnight. "We think it's time you introduced us to Eli's mother," Dad announced one Sunday. "It's only proper since you two are so serious." Against my better judgment, I arranged for Eli's mom, Marilyn, to meet my parents. Marilyn was this really successful businesswoman. She owned 3 companies and invested in startups. She was also incredibly nice and down to earth. The dinner was painful to watch. My parents spent the whole time asking Marilyn about her business, dropping hints about Dad's company, talking about how their daughters would eventually inherit everything. By the end of the night, she'd agreed to look at his business plan and consider investing. A few weeks later, Marilyn decided to invest $65,000 in Dad's business. When Eli proposed 6 months later, both families were excited about the wedding. Marilyn even offered to split the costs with my parents 50-50ths. That's when my parents started getting weird about money again. "We think you should pay for your half of the wedding expenses," Mom told me one day. "We'll pay you back later. Don't worry." I should have known better, but I was so excited about the wedding that I agreed. I spent almost all my savings, about $18,000, on what I thought was a temporary loan to cover wedding expenses. The whole time we were planning, my parents kept making comments about how expensive everything was, even though Marilyn was paying for half. Celine couldn't resist inserting herself into the process either, criticizing every decision I made. "At my wedding we had these amazing lilies," she'd say. "They were so much prettier than what you picked." I finally had to tell her to back off. I suspected she was trying to sabotage things somehow. The wedding day finally arrived, and everything was going according to plan. The venue looked beautiful, the flowers were perfect, and I felt amazing in my dress. But Celine couldn't let me have even one day of happiness. She followed me around all day making these awful comments. "You know, my wedding was so much better than this," she said right as I was getting ready to walk down the aisle. During the reception, she kept at it. "My wedding dress was so much prettier than yours," she told me while I was trying to eat dinner. "And my bridesmaids were dressed way better. These dresses look cheap." She even started going up to relatives and telling them how poorly organized everything was. "Everything was 100 times better at my wedding," I heard her telling our aunt. "The food was tastier. The music was better. The decorations were more elegant." The wedding guests were starting to notice. I could see people giving Celine weird looks, like they couldn't believe she was acting this way at her own sister's wedding. She found fault with absolutely everything. The cake wasn't as good as hers, the band wasn't as talented as the one she'd hired. Even the weather, apparently, was better on her wedding day. She couldn't find a single thing to compliment about my wedding. I was trying so hard to enjoy my special day, but Celine was making it impossible. At one point I almost started crying right there in front of everyone. That's when Eli came over and wrapped his arms around me. "Don't pay attention to her," he whispered in my ear. "This is our day, not hers." Then came time for the toasts. Marilyn stood up with her champagne glass and gave this beautiful speech about love and family and new beginnings. But then she said something that completely shocked everyone. "And as a wedding gift to my son and new daughter-in-law, I'm giving you the house on Alda Street," she said. "It's yours with no strings attached." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A whole house. I looked at Eli, and he seemed just as surprised as I was. I immediately turned to look at my parents, and their faces were priceless. They literally almost choked on their drinks. The smiles disappeared from their faces instantly, and they started whispering frantically to each other. But Celine's reaction was even more dramatic. As soon as she heard about the house, she got up and ran out of the reception hall. Just bolted. All the guests were looking around like, "What the hell just happened?" My dad jumped up and said loudly, "Celine is pregnant." She's just emotional and couldn't handle the excitement. You know how it is with pregnancy hormones. Everyone nodded like that made sense, but I could tell they thought it was weird. I mean, who runs out of a wedding because someone got a nice gift? About 20 minutes later, I was in the bathroom and heard Celine on the phone in the hallway. Taryn is so arrogant, she was saying. She thinks she's so much better than everyone else. She wanted to show off and make her wedding better than mine, but she failed. Everything was still tacky. I just shook my head. Even after getting a house as a wedding gift, Celine still couldn't admit that anything about my wedding was good. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. I had Eli, I had a new house, and I had a whole new life starting. At the end of the reception, my parents came rushing over to me. Taryn, we need to talk to you urgently, Mom said, grabbing my arm. Not now, I said firmly. I don't have time right now. Eli and I were leaving straight from the reception for our honeymoon. We'd already planned to go directly to the airport, and I wasn't about to let my parents' drama interfere with that. But this is important, Dad insisted. It can wait, I said, taking Eli's hand. We have a plane to catch. And with that, we left for our honeymoon. Whatever my parents wanted to discuss would have to wait until we got back. Eli and I had the most amazing honeymoon in Kauai, Hawaii. For 2 whole weeks, I didn't think about my crazy family at all. We just enjoyed being newlyweds, walking on the beach, trying new restaurants, and talking about our future in our new house. But all good things come to an end. When we got back to our apartment, we were both exhausted from the long flight. I was looking forward to unpacking slowly and maybe ordering some takeout. We hadn't even gotten our suitcases through the door when there was this loud knocking. I opened the door, and there were my parents standing on our doorstep with these serious expressions on their faces. They pushed past me into the apartment before I could even say hello. We need to talk, Mom said immediately. Not how was your trip or welcome home or even congratulations on getting married. Just straight to business. Can we at least get settled first? Yes. We just got off a plane. This can't wait, Dad said firmly. We've been thinking about this the whole time you were gone. We've made a decision about the house. Mom announced like she was delivering some official verdict. You need to give the house to Celine. She needs it more than you do. I literally couldn't speak for a minute. Are you insane? Finally managed to say. Don't take that tone with us, Mom snapped. We've already thought this through. Celine has 2 children, and she's pregnant with a 3rd. She needs more space. You and Eli are young. You have good jobs. You can buy your own house later. This is our house, I said, my voice getting louder. Marilyn gave it to us. It's our wedding gift. And you can explain to Eli's mother that family comes first for you, Dad said. That you decided to help your sister because that's the kind of person you are. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They wanted me to lie to Marilyn and pretend like giving away our house was my idea. We've already been to look at the house, Mom continued. It's perfect for Celine's family. 4 bedrooms, a big backyard for the kids to play in. Wait, I said. You went to our house without asking us. We wanted to make sure it would work for Celine before we talked to you, Dad explained. They'd gone to my house and walked through it like they were shopping for Celine. The nerve of these people was unbelievable. That's when Eli walked into the living room. He'd been in the kitchen, and from the look on his face, I could tell he'd heard everything. What's going on? He asked, even though he clearly already knew. We're explaining to Taryn that she needs to give the house to her sister, Mom said. As her husband, you should support this decision. Eli looked at my parents like they'd grown second heads. You want us to give away our wedding gift. It's the right thing to do, Dad said. I'll talk to your mother myself and explain why this is necessary. That's when I saw Eli's expression change completely. His face went from confused to absolutely furious. Normal parents would never ask their daughter to do something like this, Eli said, his voice getting louder. Don't tell us how to parent, Dad snapped. You're new to this family, and you need to understand how we do things. If you don't leave our apartment right now, Eli said very slowly and clearly, I'm calling the police. My parents looked at me like they expected me to tell Eli to calm down, but I just stood there and said nothing. For the first time in my life, someone was actually defending me from them. This isn't over, Taryn, Mom said as they headed toward the door. The only thing I regret is letting you into my apartment, I said after they left. Eli and I just sat on the couch in silence for a while. I was shaking from anger and disbelief. I knew your parents were weird from your stories, Eli finally said. But I never imagined they were that insane. Few hours later my phone rang. It was Marilyn. Hi, sweetie, she said, but her voice sounded confused. I just got the strangest call from your mother. She said you wanted to give the house to your sister and that you'd already agreed to it. My heart sank. They'd actually called Marilyn and lied to her. She told me you've always loved Celine so much that you decided to help her out this way, Marilyn continued. But that doesn't sound like something you'd do without talking to Eli and me first. I started crying right there on the phone. I didn't agree to anything, I sobbed. I had no idea they were going to call you. Oh, honey, what's really going on? Marilyn asked gently. So I told her everything. About how my parents had ambushed us the minute we got home, about their demands, about how they'd already gone to look at the house without our permission. I told her about Celine's jealousy and how my parents had always favored her over me. Marilyn listened to the whole story without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Taryn, sweetheart, don't you worry about this for 1 second, she said firmly. I'm going to handle this situation myself. What do you mean? Yes. Just trust me, Marilyn said. Your parents have made a very big mistake, and they're about to learn that there are consequences for trying to manipulate my family. Her voice had this edge to it that I'd never heard before. Marilyn was always so sweet and kind, but she sounded like she meant business. Thank you, I whispered. You don't need to thank me, she said. You're my daughter-in-law now, and nobody messes with my family. Nobody. After I hung up, Eli asked what Marilyn had said. She said she's going to handle it, I told him. Good, Eli said grimly. Because your parents just made a very powerful enemy, and they have no idea what's coming for them. I felt relieved knowing Marilyn was on our side, but I was also scared about what this meant for my relationship with my parents. Not that we had much of a relationship to begin with, but this felt like the point of no return. Part of me felt guilty for involving Marilyn in our family drama, but a bigger part of me was just grateful that someone finally had my back against my parents' manipulation. 2 weeks went by without any word from my parents or Celine. I was starting to think maybe they'd finally gotten the message and would leave us alone. Eli and I were busy getting ready to move into our new house, and I was actually feeling happy for the first time in months. Then Marilyn called me. Taryn, honey, I wanted to let you know what happened with your father's business, she said. I organized an investor meeting yesterday. I told your father that I was withdrawing all my money from his company immediately, and I advised the other investors to do the same. My stomach dropped. Oh no, what did he say? I explained to him exactly why I was pulling out, Marilyn continued. I told him that I had only invested in his company because you and Eli were in a serious relationship, and I wanted to support my future daughter-in-law's family. Marilyn's voice was calm, but I could hear the steel underneath it. I also told him that his company had been barely breaking even for 3 years, and that he'd never managed to turn a real profit, she said. The only reason his business was surviving was because of my investment and the other investors I'd brought in. What else did you tell him? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I told him that he and your mother had shown incredibly poor judgment, Marilyn said firmly. That they didn't appreciate the good relationship they could have had with our family, and that they'd treated you badly your entire life. I also mentioned that they clearly hadn't thought about the future of your children with Eli. I could just imagine my father's face during this conversation. He probably thought he could charm Marilyn into changing her mind. And then I told him that I would never support their family again in any way, Marilyn finished. The other investors followed my lead and pulled their money too. After that call, I didn't hear anything for a few days. Then the harassment started. My parents began calling me constantly, leaving angry voicemails and sending nasty text messages. They blamed me for ruining Dad's business and destroying the family. Mom even showed up at our apartment one day, screaming at me to fix everything immediately. "You did this on purpose," she yelled through our door. "You wanted revenge, and now you've gotten it." I told her to leave or I'd call the police. When she kept screaming, I actually did call them. She left before they arrived, but not before telling me I was dead to her. Celine joined in too, sending me text after text about how I'd ruined everything for her family. She accused me of being selfish and vindictive, saying I destroyed her children's future just because I was jealous of her. The messages got nastier and nastier. Celine called me every name in the book, saying I was a terrible sister and that I'd always been jealous of her. She said I'd planned this whole thing from the beginning, that I'd manipulated Eli's family to get back at them. It was exhausting and scary. I'd never seen my family act this crazy before, even though they'd always been pretty awful to me. Finally, Eli had enough. "We're getting a lawyer," he said after listening to one particularly vicious voicemail from my father. The lawyer sent an official cease and desist letter to my parents and Celine, warning them that if they continued harassing us, we'd go to court for a restraining order. The letter laid out all the threatening calls, texts, and visits, and made it clear that we were documenting everything. After they received that letter, the harassment stopped completely. It was like a switch had been flipped. Suddenly, total silence from all of them. A few months later, Marilyn told me what had happened to Dad's business. His company collapsed within weeks of the investors pulling out. She said he had to declare bankruptcy and sell most of his assets to pay off his debts. "Your parents are living on their pension and whatever small savings they had left," she said. "They can't afford to keep supporting Celine's family anymore." This was huge news. My parents had been paying Celine's rent and giving her family money every month for years. Celine had never worked, and her husband didn't make enough to support their lifestyle on his own. Celine's family had to move to a much smaller apartment, Marilyn told me. "They can't afford the big place your parents were paying for anymore. Celine's husband's salary is all they have now." I learned later that Celine had to give up her gym membership, her weekly nail appointments, her expensive clothes shopping, and all the other luxuries my parents had been funding. For the first time in her life, she had to live within actual means. Instead of having everything handed to her, my parents had to drastically downsize their own lifestyle too. They sold their big house and moved to a small condo. Dad had to get rid of his expensive car and buy something used. Mom couldn't afford her weekly spa treatments anymore. Honestly, I didn't feel sorry for any of them. They'd created this whole mess by being greedy and manipulative. If they'd just been happy that I'd found a good husband and received a generous wedding gift, none of this would have happened. But instead, they'd tried to take my house away and give it to Celine, just like they'd taken everything else from me my whole life. They'd lied to my mother-in-law and tried to manipulate her too. They'd pushed too far and finally faced consequences for their actions. Eli and I have been living in our beautiful house for over a year now, and we're incredibly happy. We've cut off all contact with my family, and honestly, my life is so much more peaceful without their constant drama and manipulation. Marilyn has become like a real mother to me. She treats me with the love and respect that my own parents never did. When we told her we were trying to have a baby, she was over the moon with excitement. That's the kind of reaction normal parents have to good news about their children's lives. Sometimes people ask me if I miss my family or feel bad about what happened to them. The truth is, I don't miss the stress, the manipulation, the constant feeling like I wasn't good enough. I don't miss being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. My parents and Celine made their choices. They chose to treat me like garbage for my entire life. They chose to try to steal my wedding gift. They chose to lie and manipulate when they didn't get their way. They chose to harass us when we stood up to them. Finally chose myself. I chose my husband, my new family, and my own happiness. And I've never regretted that choice for a single day. Some people say family is everything. But I've learned that chosen family can be so much better than biological family. Eli and Marilyn have shown me what real love and support look like. That's worth more than any relationship with people who only see you as someone to use and manipulate.